start as soon as you want. You ready, Carl?
Good morning, folks. Are you all prepared and ready to go?
Yep.
All right, great. Good morning once again. My name is Gary Grant. I'm the spokesperson for the National Coalition Against Contraband Tobacco. And as the chair of Toronto Crime Stoppers, I'm also one of the coalition's 15 members. Our membership represents businesses, retailers, and other organizations that are concerned about the impacts of contraband tobacco in Canada. We work to raise the profile of illegal cigarettes amongst politicians, the media, and the public. And that's why we're in Ottawa today, World No Tobacco Day. We believe that this internationally recognized Awareness Day offers the perfect opportunity to underline how contraband tobacco continues to make a mockery of the legal and regulatory protections that government has put in place to minimize tobacco use. This is particularly important when it comes to youth smoking. Contraband tobacco is extremely cheap, with a baggie of 200 cigarettes often costing less than a movie ticket. It's also sold through a criminal distribution network, a drug dealer system really, that connects cigarettes to kids without the hassles of checking for ID or traveling out of the way. This dangerous combination of low price and easy accessibility has made illegal cigarettes a prime source for youth smoking. In fact, a recent study by the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health flagged the easy accessibility of contraband tobacco as a major reason Ontario's relatively high teen smoking rate. I'm also concerned about how illegal cigarettes finance organized crime. The RCMP estimates that contraband tobacco is the cash cow of more than 175 criminal gangs, who use the proceeds to finance their other activities, including guns, drugs, and even human smuggling. For 39 years, I was a member of the Toronto Police Service, and so I know firsthand about the dangers of well-financed organized crime. I think that stopping kids from smoking and limiting funding to organized crime are reasons enough for government to take action on this important problem, but it also brings important fiscal implications to the public purse. Contraband tobacco costs governments in Canada roughly $2.1 billion annually in lost tax revenues. That's a lot of money, particularly in an era of fiscal restraint and budget tightening. So there are lots of reasons to act. The Coalition is working to raise awareness about this need. Throughout the country, we will be running advertising in some of the key communities that are affected by illegal tobacco. We've also had large-scale advertisements positioned around the nation's capital for the past month in hopes of raising awareness of this problem with both the public and the politicians from across Canada who work in Ottawa. In fact, we briefed members of Parliament earlier today and will be meeting with media throughout the rest of the day. But it's ultimately up to the governments to act. Fortunately, provincial governments are beginning to do so. Quebec and Ontario's recent budgets both committed to tough new anti-contraband measures. For several years, Quebec has allowed municipalities to launch their own cigarette investigations and even allowed them to keep any fines collected. This year's budget expands that power further and even offers more funding for the police task forces that handle these investigations. Last year, Ontario introduced new legislation that created a special fine for possession of illegal cigarettes. It also allowed police to seize illegal cigarettes without needing to call a revenue officer or an RCMP officer. This year's budget committed to bolstering these provisions with new legislation, including an important commitment to work with stakeholders and look for best practices in other jurisdictions. The federal government, meanwhile, committed during the last election to a new task force of 50 RCMP officers to focus on the contraband tobacco problem. It also committed to legislation that would create mandatory minimum sentences for repeat contraband smugglers. Both of these steps are important, and we hope that the government will enact them in short order. These are all important steps, and we hope that governments across Canada will continue to follow through with them. But more still needs to be done. The most important thing that governments can do is to recognize that contraband tobacco is a problem that crosses all departments and jurisdictions. Governments must work together to tackle this issue. The criminal gangs that run this trade do not pay attention to our borders. We cannot let our response be hamstrung by them. Provinces, the federal government, the U.S. state and federal departments, and First Nations leaders need to share information and have an open dialogue to more effectively deter this criminal activity. In closing, Contraband tobacco is an important and pressing problem in Canada. Government must take meaningful and immediate action. World No Tobacco Day is a time to think about how we can make our anti-tobacco efforts as effective as possible. Contraband tobacco makes a mockery of government regulations. It's an easy source of cigarettes for kids. It finances organized crime. It's an important place to focus. Thank you for your time. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Estimates as to how many people in the country, both legal and, of legal age and under legal age, that are buying contraband cigarettes?
Well, there's been an estimate in Ontario and Quebec at any least that those that smoke, about 40% of the smokers, give or take a percentage in the areas, are using contraband. Of course, the vast majority of Canadians do not smoke, so that's of the smokers.
Contraband cigarettes, including cigarettes that are coming in from the States, contraband cigarettes being made in Canada. Why don't you tell us where all these cigarettes are coming from?
About 90% of the cigarettes are coming from the Akwesasne, Kanawaki area and the Six Nations, where they're manufactured by legal and illegal manufacturing plants, some also being brought in from the States. So about 90% of the contraband are produced in those areas and then brought into the provinces and turned over to basically organized crime organizations that run it across the country. And a small percentage being brought in on the West Coast, counterfeit cigarettes being brought in from offshore. But predominantly, according to the RCMP, 90 to 93% of it is being manufactured right here in Canada.
Roughly $2.1 billion annually in lost tax revenues.
Yes.
How much money is going into organized crime? Like, how much are they selling these cigarettes for? How much is this funding organized crime? Do you know those stats at all?
Well, so they don't share their books with us, but a baggie of 100, 200 cigarettes costs anywhere from $10 to $30, depending on the trade situation at the time, the contraband situation. But they're making, if I said billions, I may be overestimating it, but they're certainly making millions. And they're also using it in conjunction with other things. For instance, if they're selling cigarettes to, say they're set up in a parking lot of a plaza and they're selling cigarettes to kids, they'll also be able to provide them with maybe a bottle of vodka for their weekend party, or maybe a little ecstasy for the rave that night, and anything up to weapons. So, it's obviously we can't know their dollars, but we know what it's costing Canadians, $2.1 billion a year, and they're just, as the saying goes, making off like bandits, which they are.
You mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that you met with officials this morning, or you will be meeting?
We met with some MPs this morning and had a very frank discussion with them, and had a very positive response, and from all parties. It was a bipartisan discussion, and we continue to do this. It's one of our reasons for being. I mean, we don't make the decisions. We don't come up with the answers.
That both it's tough on crime and everything. How would you rate its actions in this field? It's not the first time that you people
I've been here
for more
before.
Government action.
In fact, I've brought a report card up here before and given it, and it hasn't always been passing grades. I will give credit to the governments, as I did in my talk, to the provincial governments right now for enacting tougher measures. I will give credit to the federal government for promising tougher measures, but we're waiting to see them fulfill those promises, and then we'll be a lot happier. Thank you, folks. Have a good day.